So no more excuses. You don't think you can paint with semi-professional paints? Let me show you. It can be done. It does take a little more work, so I'll try to walk you through what I experienced here using my ArtWhale 48 color set. So to create a nice blend, add water to the area of the peach that you want to start blending, and begin with the pink and then add in the yellow. And then try to mix them in. I can see that these paints are a little more staining than I expected, so I just went over with a little more of the yellow. And you can see I'm getting a lot of spread as well here, but that's okay because in nature that's what a peach would do. So I'm just rolling with it. Now here I'm putting the little dots that I see on the yellow, but they're spreading a little too much, so it is a little wetter. So I'm just going to blend them in, and I can go back in later with a different effect. And that'll be perfectly fine. In fact, I know with this type of paint we're going to have to layer on top slowly and be patient. So to create the pit, I want a little more value. So I'm going in on that right side to show that it has form and there's roundness. And in this case, it's convex roundness. I'll have to remain a little lighter on the left side to get the highlight. So while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and work on the top peach. And I want this one to be a little bolder, not as yellow. So I'm going to pump up the pink and blend in the other colors. But you can see it's not spreading out as much as you might anticipate. And that's not a fault of yours. It's just that is the combination of this particular paint on this particular 100% watercolor paper. I'm using my Etcher sketchbook. So I am getting some nice layering here. It's doing a really wonderful job when I put the yellow over the red. I am getting some nice transition, and I want that top of the peach to have the complement, so I'm adding some purple up there to add that shading in and to neutralize it. So to create our nice edge, we're going to go darker on the edge and then blend out by adding just clean water to encourage that paint to spread. Now working on the remaining open half of the peach, I'm going to do a slightly different effect because this pit area doesn't have the pit in it, so I want it to recede a little bit. So I started with the purple to create more of a shaded area. And you don't need to worry too much about what does it exactly look like right now, because we're going to layer things on top. So I'm mixing up some green. The paints in the palette didn't have as warm of a green as I wanted, so I just used the same yellow and blended it in to the existing green so that we would have some nice color harmony. I'm just trying to keep track of my values across the layout, and I'm putting in that shadow area, but I'm being careful to lift it off of that top peach so I don't get some weird shaded area that I wasn't intending. And I'm doing the same here. I like some of the shadow to creep up, but I don't want it to be a hard line. So while I have that color on my brush, and I do see a little bit of pink in the plate in the reference photo, I'm quickly adding some of that purpley shadowy area, and then I'm trying to move it around so that I get just a soft suggestion of shadow. Trying to move quickly enough because, again, I mentioned these paints do tend to stain a little bit. They're a little harder to lift off. So as you see here, as I'm trying to blend in that edge, it's not moving as much as I would expect. But, you know, I'm okay with that. So here I'm trying to deepen some of the shadows to show, again, that the plate has form. And so I'm going in where my pencil mark is and trying to deepen up that area. And you don't have to do this all at once. Watercolor is a layering medium, so just keep going in and keep scanning across your layout to make sure you're satisfying the complete value study. You have the darkest darks, and then you remain really light where you need to. So in the background, I'm not going to try to show the wood texture with all those linear marks. I really just want a cool tone so that it recedes, and it's going to make the peaches in the plate pop off a little more. So I'm going in kind of lightly, and then what I can do is I can deepen the top right where I want the shadow to make sense, because I know I'm going to deepen the shadow between the peaches. So I'm just going in kind of quickly, painterly, so it matches the style of the peaches I'm painting, and I'm just adding some value. So now that the pit area is dried, I can go in with the same color, but it'll layer on top and it'll be a little bit darker, and I'll try to show some of those little pock marks in the pit. And I can tell I've kind of overfilled it a little bit, so I will attempt to lift a little bit off so that it's not just such a solid mark, because that really wasn't my intention. I kind of overdid it. So here you see me just lifting off a little bit, and then I can go in when it dries with a darker layer on top. So I'm trying to add in a deeper tone of those pit holes. I'm going to do another layer on top of this with the harder edge, because I do want to show that there's color there. It's not just a value. And I will try to blend and mix that in so it's not so hard. But that is one of the big differences I see with semi-professional paints versus my typical Daniel Smith paints. I have a lot more time, and they give me a lot more flexibility. So here you have to just kind of make quicker decisions and move a little faster than I was in order to get those nice smooth blends you want. And it might be a matter of understanding the pigment qualities. So if this particular red was staining, there might be another one in the palette that moves a little bit better, and the next time I paint a peach I can select that instead. So here I'm going on glazing more of the yellow on top of that peach to get a little richer tone. And I'll start to put the bottom layers of this little stem area on the top peach while I have that color out, and I can allow it to dry. And then I need to work on this recess of where the pit was without it looking like an actual pit. So I've adjusted my colors a little bit so they're a little softer. I've added a little more water, and I'm not going in with as much of the brown tones. And this peach also needed a little more glazing just to get more of that rich tone so that my three peaches complement each other. That's probably more important than looking at the reference photo to try to get exactly what you see there. It's more, what does your particular painting require? Because no one, as I've mentioned in many other videos, no one's looking at the reference photo compared to your painting. They're just looking at your painting as its own entity. With that said, I'm doing the same technique as I did to the peach on the left, where I'm going in with pink along the edge, and then I'm adding a little bit more of that color within the flesh of the peach. And then I'm trying to blend in so that I get those nice kind of soft edges. The area around the pit here, I wanted to add a little more of the pink to differentiate it from the actual pit itself. And I could also see that the area that the pit left behind, this concave area, it had a little more pink as well. And so once I've added that, I feel like that top peach needs to have a little more punch and a little more richness. So I'm going in with another glazed layer of that brighter color. Now with the leaf here, I didn't get enough of the veining that I wanted in my first layer. So I'm just going on top and I'm adding a little more depth to it to show that the leaf is actually a curved leaf, and this portion of it is darker because it's in the background. Ultimately, it'll blend into the middle shadow area, but I do need to make it relate to the other portion of the leaf. So here I've added the veining at the bottom, but I'm going to do the same to the top just so that you can begin to see the veins in the leaf and it looks a little more realistic. And then I kind of went overboard here a little bit, so I'm just making this a little darker to try to cover a little bit of that green, because again, it is hard to lift off, where normally I could just remove it by adding water and scrubbing it off. But it's okay. It'll actually just look like depth of shadow, so it worked out okay. And even though this peach is a little bit darker than the reference photo, it still looks believable in relationship to my other two. So I'm adding that second layer on top of the stem area to try to give it a little more dimension. And I'm noticing that I need to show a little more form here on the peach to show that it kind of has these dimples around the stem area. So now it's very evident to me that the shadow between the peaches needs to be much richer. So I'm starting with the peach to give it more shape, and then now I'm going in even darker to have the shadow just kind of dissipate into from one peach to the next. And that's finishing off that value story that we were talking about earlier. And I am taking a little bit of that shadow color and bringing it up on the peach just to have that smooth transition. Know that the peach and the shadow reflect on each other. And so now this requires me to deepen up the area above because it should be about the same value as that inner shadow. So I want to give it a little more drama, and I'm just trying to deepen up the rest of the plate so that again it all kind of relates to one another. But this is the time you look across and you say, what did you miss? Where do you need to perfect? I can tell that I don't have quite enough detail showing, so I'm adding the color around the plate, which actually was a silver color around the rim of that plate. So I'm going ahead and I'm trying to make that a little bit darker. And then I realized that I need to put those little specks back in, so I'm going to go ahead and just splatter a little bit to get those spots that were bleeding too much earlier on. And you could cover up around the areas you don't want. Here I'm just sort of blending them in. You know, I have this is a sketchbook mentality too, so I'm a little looser and a little crazier than I normally am. And, you know, that is the freedom of working within a sketchbook, so it's okay. But, you know, if you're creating more of a final painting, you can just be a little more precise. And you know, as I add one thing, I'm constantly making adjustments. You know, I really want that brilliance of the peach to pop, so I could tell it needed another layer and a little more glaze. But here's where I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow to some white gouache, because I can go in and kind of restore some of the highlights that I lost when I was blending in the areas of both the pit recess and the pit itself. And so it's a nice way just to add a little bit of opaque paint. I did forget that this particular set came with white watercolor, and I probably could have used that, but I'm so used to just adding gouache at the end if I need to add a little bit of these highlights that I just did that naturally. So here you can pick up whatever you missed if you didn't leave it as paper. I felt like this little highlight area could be a little bit stronger, so I just went ahead and added it. And then I liked the effect, and I realized that the vein could benefit from that, so I added a little bit of the green to the white gouache, and I'm just going in here to emphasize, and you can see how that really makes that leaf look like it's curling now, because I was able to go lighter on top of that background, and I could pick up this area where it connected onto the stem, so I was happy with that. But really, that's it. I'm pretty happy. Other than the paint's not lifting quite as well as I would have expected, overall, I think the end result was nice. And you have a huge range of color within this set. And for the $40 ticket price to purchase this, you really can't beat that. If I paid for tubes of Daniel Smith paint, I'd be paying a lot more money than that to try to emulate the same set. So it's just, as you're learning, I think feel satisfied with the set like this. It gives you a lot of opportunity to experiment with color and to learn and to try different brush techniques and such. So I hope you learned and you can appreciate the set you have, and you'll join me next time.